Welcome to the Everyday Apostle, where ordinary lives meet extraordinary faith. Join our host, Kendall Peterson, as we explore how everyday men and women bring the gospel to life wherever they live, work, and play. Let's dive into it right now.
Hello, and welcome to episode 14 of the Everyday Apostle. I'm your host, Kendall Peterson. It's a joy to bring these stories and these guests that get to share how they are living their faith in the everyday life. And today I have a very special guest with us, and I'm really excited to introduce Jose Cueto, the CEO of Grove Bank and Trust, who will be joining us in the studio today. But today, first, our sponsor, today's episode of the Everyday Apostle, is sponsored by Fugoid International. Success doesn't happen by chance. It follows a formula. Fugoid calls this the essential elements, proven framework that helps both for-profit and nonprofit organizations master the 7 core principles of lasting success, from strategy and growth to leadership and culture. Here's the best part. Fugoid offers a free organizational assessment to help you identify where your organization excels and where you can grow. It's the first step in aligning your mission, inspiring leadership, and achieving impactful results. Visit Fugoid.com. That's Fugoid, Fugoid.com, to learn more and to schedule your free assessment today. Now, let's dive into today's show. As I mentioned, we have Jose Cueto with us here in the studio. Welcome, Jose.
Thank you, Kendall. Excited to be on the Everyday Apostle and look forward to our next half an hour together.
Awesome. I'm excited to have you here, too. I know we've been working on this for the past couple of months, and I'm glad that you're here. So let me read your bio. I can't do it justice from my memory, so I'm going to read it. Today, I'm honored to welcome Jose, the Chief Executive Officer of Grove Bank and Trust, to the Everyday Apostle. With over 36 years of experience in the banking industry, Jose has built an impressive career leading teams, managing assets, and strategically growing organizations. Jose's journey began at Republic National Bank of Miami, and he's since then held leadership roles at First Union, Capital Bank, Bank Leumi, and International Finance Bank before taking on his current role at Grove Bank and Trust. Along the way, he's earned accolades like Lender of the Year and the Ponce de Leon Excellence Award, and recognition as South Florida Business Journal Power Leader 3 years in a row. That's amazing. I didn't know that was 3 years in a row. Beyond banking, Jose is deeply committed to serving his community. He is the immediate past chairman of the Florida Bankers Association, a member of the Orange Bowl Committee, and sits on multiple boards, including the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta's Miami branch and the Sebastian Strong Foundation. Jose is a proud graduate of Belen Jesuit Prep and Florida International University. Jose is also a devoted husband to his wife of 28 years, Ashley, and father to their 3 children, Alex, Madison, and Christopher. Jose's story is one of leadership, service, and faith in action, and I'm thrilled to have him on today's show. Welcome once again to share your journey and your insights, Jose.
Thank you, Kendall. Excited to be here and share that journey.
Awesome. So from your bio, you sound an awful lot like a Miami guy. Were you born and raised here?
Born and raised in Miami, and born here, schooled here, college here, and have the majority of my career has been in South Florida. So yes, I'm a Miami native.
Awesome. Yeah. Awesome. How about your wife? Was she born and raised here?
She's born and raised here as well. She's a product of Gables High.
Okay.
But she is multi-generational Miami, so
very nice.
She's been a long time Floridian and native to Miami as well. So
okay. And culturally, where's your family from?
My family is originally from. The majority of my family is a combination of Sicily, Spain, and then the Canary Islands. But everybody migrated to Cuba. Right. And then from Cuba, they came to the United States. The majority of my family arrived in the late 50s, early 60s as they fled Fidel Castro and you know, it's communism.
Right.
To start a new life in this country. So.
Well, looks like they did a good job of that.
They did. I owe a lot to them for the opportunities that, you know, were afforded to me because of the sacrifices that they made. So I'm always very happy to be an American, but also very proud of, you know, the Cuban heritage, and, you know, I think it's the best of both worlds. So I've been very blessed.
That's amazing. It's easy to forget one or the other, and I think it's a blessing that you hold on to both.
Yeah, I mean, this is an amazing country, but, you know, I also take a lot of pride in, you know, where my family came from and our Cuban roots, and, you know, what Cubans have done in this country is something that, you know, I'm proud of, despite the fact that I was born here. So.
You have every right to be.
Yeah.
So, since you grew up here, and you know, there's a history, right? A lot of families that came out of Cuba at that period of time, it was usually led to a lot of hard work, usually led to a lot of tight-knit family groups.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen a lot of people come out of that and cling to their faith. So since this is the Everyday Apostle podcast, what was faith like? What was your faith life like as you were growing up?
I mean, I grew up Catholic, you know, Sundays at church. I went to a Jesuit high school, and, you know, faith at every stage in my life has been present from the moment that I was born. You know, it's a journey. I think you know that. I know that. I think most people who are on this journey understand it, and, you know, you go through different chapters of what that faith looks like until you're comfortable with who you are and, you know, where you are at a certain stage in your life, I believe. But my upbringing was, you know, Christ and faith were always part of the discussion, and part of the DNA of who our family is. You know, it's always been.
So did you have any like super high moments, epiphanies, kind of big bang moments in your faith, or was it more?
Well, I mean, you know, I think it was steady. I think when you're young, you know, I think you don't always have a complete understanding of what faith looks like, nor do you have a complete understanding of the Bible. I think, you know, I grew closer in my faith in 2015. I had I don't want to call it a come to Jesus moment, but let's call it a come to Jesus moment when my father passed away. I had assumed leadership of International Finance Bank as a very young CEO at the time. I had probably been there, let's say 3 months. And, you know, 3 months into that, I lost my father. You know, that was followed by a friend approaching me and saying, hey, you know, I'd like you to come, you know, and join me at BSF, which is Bible Study Fellowship. And, you know, I don't need any commitment from you. I just, you know, I want you to come and I want you to listen and just, you know, just observe what we're doing at BSF. And I think that was, you know, the initial inertia that started to draw me into, you know, what I would call now more than a decade journey into strengthening my faith. And I think that, you know, that was certainly a catalyst. Mm-hmm. I think at the time it happened, you know, my wife was further along in her own faith journey at that time, and she certainly had a big influence in terms of what my journey has looked like, right? And some of her boldness in her faith. So I don't, you know, I think it's hard to pinpoint one specific moment in history. I think it's a culmination of things maybe leading up to a life-changing event where you need to lean on something bigger than yourself, you know, and I think that was my case.
Yeah, it's kind of funny how God uses those moments in our life. I won't necessarily say that I believe that he creates all of those moments, but everything exists to glorify God, right? And so in those moments, even tragedies, house fires or deaths or whatever, can be great moments of us, you know, attaching to God.
Yeah, and I think that's, you know, I think you're spot on there. As you grow in your faith, you start to better understand the interconnections, right? And how everything is ultimately connected to God. You know, I think like everything, I think whether it's professional or in sports, sometimes connecting dots and things slowing down to a pace where you can better digest and understand them. I don't think that faith is, much different than certain other things. I think that there's a moment, like when you have a come to Jesus moment, there's also a moment where you get it.
Mm-hmm.
You have a deeper understanding. And through that deeper understanding, I think that there's an inherent path where your faith is now growing organically. It's not growing in a manner where you're trying to understand. You've understood and accepted, and now it's about growth and, what that journey looks like for each person, because every person's journey is somewhat different and unique, and I'm certainly cognizant of that.
So, since you're kind of calling out that 2015-ish time frame, so before that, what did you living your faith look like?
I had faith, and I was clear in terms of who my Lord and Savior was, but I wasn't maybe necessarily living that.
Okay.
I think, the people I surrounded myself with and some of the things that I was engaged in, not that any of it was, anything crazy, just really, it started to become something that I didn't necessarily want to be a part of. And, that coincided with some of my own, growth personally and also propelling my growth, on my faith journey or my Christ journey, whichever you'd like to pick. But, it's a lot of pieces kind of put together.
Right.
I would say that I maybe was more human and of the world than a person of faith, where today faith comes first, and some of this outside noise doesn't even really, influence the way I live my life.
It's a great place to be. Now, it's a great place to be.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you know how this is. This is sometimes I feel I take many steps forward, and sometimes I take a couple of steps backwards. But, I think when I look at the net effect of all of those steps, as long as I'm continuing to move forward in my journey and I'm forging what my faith is and my own expectations of myself in front of God, I think that, I give myself the same grace God gives us all, because I realize that I am an imperfect sinner at the end of the day. And, it's lofty goals, in terms of, what perfection looks like. We know it's only one person. So.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. And, I would imagine that we're fairly similar. We're guys and professionals and all of that. And, there's such a struggle in a worldly sense to push forward and be the best you can be and be high achieving and do all of that stuff. And what's easily recognizable in somebody that's really, really come to the point where their faith life has matured is you see that shift from, I don't need to be perfect. I can accept the fact that I'm a sinner. I want to be better, but I can accept the fact that I'm a sinner. I can accept the fact that I'm imperfect, and I'm consistently striving for more, versus maintaining a facade of living in big houses and driving fancy cars and living, the high life, thinking that says that we're successful. So it's interesting that you kind of confirm that.
I've been, I'm open that, God in my life is number one. Then closely thereafter are my friends, my family, and a distant third is what I do professionally every day. It's not even really close to number one and number two. And, I think that is the realization where you start to understand that, that some of the things that maybe the world likes to define as success is maybe quite the opposite of that. And that success is, what you define your life in parallel to God really kind of is. I think that I don't measure my success. I measure my success by how close I am and a reflection of God. That's how I measure success, and it's not has nothing to do with wealth, what I do for a living, or any of that. And I think that, when I came to that realization, I think that the biggest takeaway from it is the peace, right? Of, okay, I'm really I'm not in control. I give it up to God. I give my fear up to God, and living a life with no fear and with peace is much more in line with what God wants for us than a life filled with why am I not perfect, or what's the next milestone in my career going to be. I literally, I that doesn't even enter my psyche. Whatever tomorrow brings, tomorrow will bring, because it's going to come anyways.
Right, exactly. No matter what you think is going to happen.
Exactly. I'm not controlling. I'm just a child of God.
Right.
God knows what my story will look like when all is said and done, and I'm okay with giving that to Him and letting Him be the author of what that story looks like.
So, I guess for the audience that doesn't know, I have had occasion to see you in the workplace and interact with you in a professional sense as well, which is why you're here on the show. And there was, aside from the fact that you wear, what would Jesus do bracelets and stuff like that, there was a moment in a particular meeting where you mentioned very openly among your coworkers and the leadership of the organization, you mentioned the importance of glorifying God in what you do, and that really stuck out to me. That was something that is so rare in my experience, somebody that can just so openly do that. That definitely sounds like something that came after your come to Jesus moment in 2015. I don't imagine you were doing that a whole lot before.
Mm-mm.
So, one of the reasons I started this podcast was people would come to me and say, hey, you're very openly a believer in Christ. You're very openly Catholic even, but you don't cram it down people's throats. How are you able to do that? How are you able to feel comfortable enough to do that? So that's why I started the podcast. So that's kind of where I'm going to go with this next question. What was it like for you to become comfortable? Was it an instant thing, or did that kind of grow for you?
No, I think being bold in your faith takes time. I think delivery, timing, and correct moments exist. And I think you can pick and choose, right? There's settings where, it maybe isn't appropriate. And, what I deem inappropriate today is a much smaller it's a much smaller sample than maybe before I entered this Christ journey. I also, because I'm at peace and don't really fear, because I understand that, God will provide. He always provides. And He, in the end, is, He's designed a plan, and that's His plan for me. That has emboldened me to be more vocal in my faith and to not have a fear of crossing Christianity with corporate America, when it's appropriate. So, I say those things because we live in a world where oftentimes it's about me, right? And it's about how is something affecting me. So invoking, Christ or faith into a workplace conversation is more about not only expectations in terms of the way you should behave or what the expectations are within an organization, but also trying to put it in front of people that the expectations in the way we carry ourselves in this world, span far broader and deeper than anything in corporate America. But, I think there are some things that you can take away. I think that you honor God in the way you work. You work hard to honor your God. I think that if He's bestowed gifts upon us, whether it's a gift of knowledge, whether it's a gift of communication, whether it's the gift of leadership, acknowledging the God that is the source of those gifts to you and honoring Him by really taking the gifts that you've been given and trying to make the most out of them. I think that's how you honor God. And, you know, I think sometimes, you know, we forget that God is very graceful, and humans to each other oftentimes are much less graceful than God is with us. So I try to use those opportunities to teach, coach, and, you know, hope and inspire. And, you know, sometimes wearing these bracelets on my wrist will invoke a question from someone, and that is an easy platform to be able to, you know, to have a conversation about what faith looks like, and, you know, what a journey may look like for a particular person, or, you know, how you can invoke your faith to deal with, you know, things in this world that maybe keep you up at night, you know. And if I can bring peace to someone by reinforcing the strength of what faith can be, then I take those opportunities.
That's great. So that's in the professional sense. How does that look in your home life? You had mentioned just a couple of things. You had mentioned, obviously, you have 3 kids, and kids can pose a challenge. But your wife,
it's a struggle. I mean, I'll tell you that it's a struggle. It's a struggle because they're a generation, you know, that is, you know, in many ways has a lot more being thrown at them that maybe the generations before. I feel that, you know, social media and other influences in their life, you know, can have, you know, an oftentimes, you know, negative or addictive effect. And maybe those are things that we didn't necessarily have to deal with in our time. So I think, you know, trying to emphasize, you know, what faith looks like, what control, the value of the things that we place in a place of importance in our life. I think those are lessons that my wife and I both are constantly trying to pass on to our children to varying degrees of success. I can tell you that when I was that age, I didn't necessarily want to hear that, and that my real journey of faith began when I felt that I was ready for it. And, you know, and I think, you know, I'd be remiss not to say that those are challenges. Mm-hmm. You know, I pray about it constantly. You know, and as much as I always try to lead by example, sometimes my example, you know, I'm not perfect. I'm a sinner. I make mistakes. I say things I sometimes shouldn't say. So, you know, what I do is catch myself. And, you know, I think focusing on, you know, God provides me with certain guardrails. But, you know, I think we all struggle with, you know, the dichotomy of trying to be a Christian in the world. Right. I think that struggle never goes away. I think that it's a lifelong struggle, and one that ends with your entry into the kingdom. Right. I think that's where you leave the world behind. Right. So it's a struggle. I mean, we attend church. You know, I told you all of my kids have gone to Christian schools, but, you know, it's we're living in interesting times and times that where, you know, the enemy is everywhere you turn, right? So sometimes it's about identifying what the enemy looks like and trying to paint a picture of, you know, what faith and what God look like. It's challenging. It's not easy.
100%. Totally agree with that for sure. So you've mentioned a couple of things, you know, things that kind of help you along that journey. One, obviously going to church. You mentioned Bible study.
Yeah. So
I'm curious, are there any other things that you do that you find help ground you in your faith?
You know, I think maybe it's about the things I don't do.
Okay.
I don't watch news.
That's got to help.
I'm not on social media. I have very limited time, as you know. So the little time I have, I want to focus on God and my family. And whatever time I have left, I try to focus that on my career. But I think it's not walking into something by never walking towards it is, you know, I think that's a plausible, you know, manner in which to, you know, embolden and strengthen your faith. Outside of that, I work, you know, you mentioned it earlier in my bio. I do see God at work working, in a pediatric cancer foundation as a director of that board, I think that, that has definitely brought me very close to God, and I think helped me reconcile, that there's certain things that are in God's plan that sometimes we don't understand,
right.
And that it's a process of faith, and I think it's a combination of all of those things is really what, in the end, really keeps you grounded and planted and disciplined and structured in your journey, despite the fact that we fall off all the time, because I do fall off. I fall off quite a bit. But, I always get back on the horse and try to do better the next time around. So.
Right. And maybe that's the key right there, right, is just knowing that no matter what we do, it's not going to be enough to be perfect, and that we have to keep trying and trying and trying.
Yeah, and it's perfection. And I'm a type A, and perfection was always part of that vocabulary. Today, it's not anywhere in my vocabulary. I accept my imperfection. I accept my struggle. I accept my desire to want to be better, but better in the eyes of God, not better in the eyes of the world. And that's a huge difference. And it's one that brings a great sense of peace, and it strengthens it. I think, that peace and the elimination of fear of what tomorrow may bring and what we have to be for tomorrow, that doesn't exist anymore. And that, that's the beginning of your change and what that journey may look like for each person.
That's awesome. So I'm going to wrap it up. We're, believe it or not, at the end of our time. I told you it would go quick. Your marriage is kind of the last piece that I wanted to touch on. You said your wife was a little bit ahead of you, back at one point in time. Since you have kind of made the adjustments that you've made, where have you seen those differences in your marriage?
I mean, I think there's much more alignment on what we believe to be important. I think that there's much more alignment in terms of the values that we want to instill in our children. I think there's a joint philosophy about not fearing what tomorrow may bring. And I think that, that comes, all of it kind of, transitions you into a place of peace, a house where there's a lot of laughter and a lot of fun and not so concerned about the outside noise at times. And I think it's brought our family closer.
Well, that's worth the price of admission in itself, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Even over and above the eternal joy in heaven part.
Absolutely. I think that, I could think of few things, that are better than spending an afternoon at home with my family versus being out doing something else. And I think, it's a big change. That's a big change in my life in terms of, where there's value and what it is we should be prioritizing. So.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of that and sharing your story. And we say it over and over on the show. It's a continual march toward that greatness that we hope we hope for in heaven, right? It's not we hit perfection and stay there. And I think you did a really, really good job of encapsulating that and sharing that. So thank you for that. Guys, that's it for episode 14. Short and sweet again. I thank you all for your prayers. I thank you all for your messages. And I thank you for your support. If you feel the need that you would love to support what we do or support this mission and sponsor an episode, feel free to reach out at everydayapostle.com. That is everydayapostle.com. And until then, guys, stay in prayer, stay focused, keep God front and center in your life. And that's it.
Thanks for tuning in to the Everyday Apostle. Don't forget to like and subscribe on YouTube, on your favorite podcast outlet, and at our website at everydayapostle.com. Until next time, stay blessed.